You have clarity, you know which direction you're heading in, and you feel excited about the journey that you're about to go on. You can start taking action. Maybe you're gaining some momentum, but at some random moment, something in life knocks you completely off track, and you don't know how to right yourself, or you try and right yourself, but you can't, and then it causes you to quit and stop, and then you don't return to this for another couple of years. This is why stage 3 is really important, all about mental resilience. The symptoms here: you quit when things get hard. You sometimes overdo it and then you end up burning out and then quitting. And symptom 3, you experience a life curveball. Something in your personal life hits you and then you just can't right yourself. You can't get back into your flow. So next up is mental trap 3, what I call the recovery paradox. After a setback, you often intend to push harder to try and catch up with the lost time. Does that ring a bell? This doesn't work most of the time. So why do we do this? Well, you feel behind, so you try and get back on the horse as quickly as possible, and that's what this image is there for. Sometimes you feel a bit guilty because you've had this period of time where you've not made any progress. I would constantly push, so much so I would get sick and it would knock me out, and sometimes I've actually ended up in hospital when that's happened. Now, I notice my most driven and ambitious clients will often experience this. They feel so bad for the lost time. They overcompensate and overdo it and eventually get sick. And they have similar, they'd have similar symptoms to me. So we need to resolve this. Now, there are a few ways to right yourself after a fall that are really sustainable. But first, a quick reflection. When setbacks happen, what is your recovery plan? Do you have systems to get back on track when you're overwhelmed, stressed, or burnt out? How can you become more resilient so that nothing can stop you? Here are 3 immediate focus points. Number 1, recovery routines. Imagine you finally got some momentum, okay? And you're in a rhythm until something happens. It feels like this. You hit, a wall appears out of nowhere and life hits you with some kind of curveball. You go there and the next thought, you have a break and then you think, right, this is what I intend to do. Quickly get back up and then get back into the flow. I heard this story time and time again. Now, I have experienced this, right? So I'm very familiar with this and I hear this from lots of clients and they actually do this. So this is what actually happens. They try and then it fails bad and it stays that way. And this is not something that can be sustained. And sometimes even just the thought of trying to pick yourself up looks like this. It feels like an insurmountable wall. And so then they don't even bother. A client example, we'll use Jodie because this was quite a big issue for her. And she's an extremely hard worker and had very high expectations of herself. Working full time and had really stressful periods from her full-time job, which made her push harder in her home projects. And this was a big transition for her to change career. Now, historically, she would push and push and push on her own projects, and then she'd eventually get sick and have to take a few months off. So what we did is we focused on building a more sustainable recovery plan after she'd been beaten down with these stressful periods with work. And what it looks like is this. You have a break. Now, we want some kind of recovery routine. It is a sustainable rehabilitation process, a bit like this, when you recover from some kind of operation. We want it to be safe and sustainable. It gets us back to the target place we want to be, but we do so in a gradual process that actually makes sense for the body and mind. Now, this can vary from person to person. That's why you need a dedicated recovery routine built for you. So take some time to at least to think about this. Most people don't even think about this at all. And so they end up sabotaging themselves. Be strategic with this. Now, if you want some help, I'll be doing a video on this too about some frameworks of how to do this. Now, again, I can kind of give you some examples from different clients I've worked with because their shape of recovery routine looks really different. Depends on the person, depends on the situation that they're trying to recover from. Now, when life gets really chaotic, sometimes everything can become too much. So you can't work on your own personal projects. Have you experienced that? So number 2, emotional management. So we're going to talk about how to manage emotions when you're trying to do these big changes because it's really important. Many ignore how emotions affect performance. given my upbringing, I never really thought about how my emotions affect performance. I just thought you have a bunch of instructions and you just do it. You don't think about anything and you don't focus on how you're feeling either. That was a mistake for me because I would go through cycles of getting really sick and not understanding why. You need to understand your patterns here. Why? Because it allows you to build systems to support yourself. And this was critical for me because I kept breaking at stage 3. I just didn't know stage 3 was needed. So I want to talk to you about a concept I call peak emotional events. This has been a game changer for some clients who really needed it. So many clients struggle with this one. I'll explain this in a minute, and there'll be a full training module coming soon, but I'll give you an overview. So we can think about when something happens in your life that is really big. It could be a personal thing, something to do with family. It could be a big presentation or a job interview. And what happens is, this is when it happens, on this day here. But the emotional drain, it peaks here, but it actually affects you in daily life. And for a number of days or hours before and a number of days and hours after. But we often don't take this into account. Have you ever felt that let's say you've got a big event happening on a Wednesday that you can't focus on Tuesday, you just want to take some time out on Thursday and Friday. And so it essentially affects 4 days of your week. And it can sometimes look like this. Let's say you've got a job interview here. This is your peak emotional event. But the affected days look like this. Now, we intuitively understand this, but there's a problem here because when you're trying to work on these big, ambitious projects of yours, and it could be a change of career or building a side business, you can become really sensitive to your level of focus. So what is the effect on your focus? Well, what happens is during a peak emotional event, you can see a curve similar to this. Your focus is fine. And then as you get towards your peak emotional event, as the emotions get higher, your focus starts to drop. And it will happen here. Your focus drops below a functional threshold. This is where I would say, and I experienced this when I tried to build my own thing, I realized I just lost my creativity at this point here. And then it doesn't return to you here. So you might have a period of 1 day where your peak emotional event happens, but you can't think for that whole week. So it can sometimes write off a whole week for you. Some people are more affected than others. It just so happened that I found I was really sensitive to this. So if I had a big event or something where I had to show up in a certain way, somewhere in the middle of the week, I just couldn't focus for the days before and days after. Or if I was away for a weekend, it could be with friends or family, I should really struggle getting back into the flow of things. When I had a really high stakes project to get back to work in, my headspace wasn't there. I really noticed this when I was trying to create content. The quality of my content dropped dramatically and I just couldn't pick it up. And I wondered why. So this is what it can look like. You've got your emotional curves and then you've got your corresponding focus curves. I'll be going into this more in a video which will be coming soon. But this becomes an even bigger problem when you start stacking emotional events because they don't just happen once. You will get continual emotional events. What does that look like? Well, let's have a look. So you have one emotional event here, then you have another one here, then you have another one here, which soon comes after this, and you have another one here. This is going to cause an absolute mess. And I have seen people's calendars and it can really look like this. What does it do to your energy and focus? Well, it looks something like this. So for this whole period of time, which could be a whole month, you feel like your focus is all down here. Now, when I've worked with clients and we pull up their calendar, they say, oh, over these next 2 months, I'm going away here. I've got family do here. I've got a work do here. And it looks like 1 day here, 2 days here. But you don't realize the collateral effect or the collateral damage, of all of these events happening within that month. Then we look at, okay, so how much focus energy? So they would look at their monthly calendar and think that it's not going to be a problem. Like they've got all of these free days. But when we then do an analysis of the likely impact on their emotional state, they realize they had no free strong creative days in between. Now, sometimes you can't avoid some of these peak emotional events, but there are many that you can. Sometimes that they're social events or going away, or there can be some events that you can that are negotiable. This is life. We have to find a way to do this. Now, if we can remove it, great. But if we can't, we need a way to manage losing all of this focus and energy. We need a way to deal with this. How can we do that? So this comes on to number 3, defensive systems. This is a really, really key one and has allowed a lot of clients I've worked with able to weather storms. Now, let's look at this. So you might think, okay, let's go for an adventure. It's nice and sunny. Most people just leave their progress completely up to chance. They just think, okay, it's sunny today, let's go for an adventure. And they don't think about this day, yeah? And this could be a period of time, by the way. This is just an illustration. Most people don't have a plan for when this day comes. They just plan for the sunny days because everyone's got kind of rose-tinted glasses at this time. The reality is, any ambitious project, remember at the beginning, if you want to build something really ambitious, it's going to last many days or weeks or months even. So in this case, with this, if you want to go for a quick weekend little yacht trip, yes, it could be sunny for the whole weekend. If you're trying to go transatlantic, you are definitely going to encounter some kind of storms. This is inevitable. You will have a period like this. What are you doing to prepare yourself for it? So, defensive systems. What do you do when a storm hits you? You need a system. Like with a real boat, you have anchors. You can batten down the hatches, right? You close up shop, you stop sailing, you pull the sail down so you don't capsize. You might not make so much progress on those days, but you don't expect to. And then you go below deck and you can watch some movies and drink some nice hot chocolate and cookies. So what is the equivalent in real life? We can create some, what I like to call defensive playbooks. These are kind of practical playbooks. It's not just theory. This is what you actually do when the storm hits you. Now, this has been really tricky. It's something that I've had to work on really hard because storms would hit me. I would get knocked off. Storms would hit me and it would completely take me off the rails. And then I'd get sick. Now, I needed a way to save myself in a situation. This may or may not sound fairly easy and obvious, but if it sounds a bit complex and a bit kind of overdoing it, think about this. You actually already have a defensive playbook. When you get sick, you execute your defensive playbook. You might take time off work. You spend time on a sofa. You have lemon and honey and ginger, and you drink soup. So this is like a defensive playbook for when you get sick or you get the flu. So we can have defensive playbooks when we get really stressed or curveballs start to hit us in some way. I often see this when I'm working longer term with clients because they've got a really, really big, ambitious long-term project. We will start in a sunny mode, and I know for sure they will inevitably need a defensive system. And then eventually we go through a period where the clouds turn really dark and then the storm comes in. And so we do a lot of prep for the defensive playbook. And a lot of times clients won't realize, or it's hard for them to imagine how useful it's going to be. But as soon as the storm hits, we have to execute. And they are so thankful that they have the defensive playbook on hand, which we've practiced as well. So you've got to drill it too. Just like a fire drill. So if a fire happens, you don't want to be learning where the fire exits are when the fire is there. We often don't like to do fire drills, but we do it to gain familiarity. And often we do it when it's really sunny. Just like this, we need to do this too. Now, so yeah, remember this. You will encounter bad weather at some point. It will happen. Now, coming back to Anne, we had to create defensive playbooks. She was working on some really ambitious projects, and we had special weekly routines when it was set up when life was really against her. She had some really challenging periods in life, so we built some defensive playbooks that would allow her to operate in a lower energy state to get her through that, so that she could build momentum after that when the sun came out again. So here it looks like this. You have checklists. We create these playbooks, have very simple checklists, back to simple rules from earlier, and we practice it. Another quick client example, Jodie. We focused on building sustainable recovery periods, right, from earlier when she got knocked off of her plans. We designed defensive playbooks to manage her workload, and included, this was an interesting one, included some detailed boundary setting scripts. She was getting a lot of heat from some of her colleagues, and who were very demanding. Her job was very demanding. So we actually, part of her defensive playbook, we actually had scripts that she could say when she needed to say no and put boundaries up. Because in the moment when she was feeling low on energy, she would be more inclined to say yes to things that she couldn't deliver. We then focus on optimizing her project work during these peak emotional events. So we looked at how we can get the biggest steps forward in some of her personal projects. For example, making sure some follow-up emails were going up to the relevant people to help her move the career, rather than these big kind of long articles that she had to write or anything like that. Too heavy load. Could we do some smaller tasks in that period that would still make her progress during these difficult periods? So you have clarity, you have your direction, stage 1. You can take action and you don't make so many excuses, stage 2. You can now manage a crisis and bounce back when you get derailed, stage 3. But you're struggling with being consistent in the long term. This is up next. Stage 4, long-term consistency.